successfully made your mortgage payments, you deserve thanks for doing the right thing. And I'd like to tell you about a powerful financial tool that rewards your commitment. Hi, I'm Jay Farner, president of Quicken Loans. And the tool that I'm talking about is the Home Affordable Refinance Program, or HARP. HARP is designed to help you lower your mortgage payments. It's for homeowners who are current on their mortgage payments, but due to the housing market may have little or no equity left in their home. And even if you were unable to get a HARP loan in the past, new guidelines mean that now you may be eligible. More than 2.5 million homeowners have already taken advantage of HARP and are saving an average of $250 a month. If you're one of the millions yet to take advantage, call us today at 800-QUICKEN. To learn more, call Quicken Loans today at 800-QUICKEN or go to QuickenLoans.com. That number again is 800-QUICKEN.
Important terms and conditions apply. Call us for cost information. Equal housing lender. Licensed in all 50 states. NMLS number 3030.
WTAN, Clearwater, Tampa Bay. WDCF, Dade City, Tampa Bay. WZHR, Zephyr Hills, Tampa Bay. Listen.
Welcome to Pull No Punches Radio, the radio show by the fighters for the fighters. Pull No Punches Radio is powered by Enlisted 9 Fight Company and is hosted by UFC lightweight and Ultimate Fighter Season 16 winner Colton Smith, the outspoken and controversial Jay Pagliaro, and Staff Sergeant Dan O'Brien. Now it is time for the one and only Pull No Punches Radio featuring Jay, Colton, and Dan.
I wish I knew then what I know right now. When my parents split, that's when it shook my ground. No source of strength now, my life was unclear. Cracks in the foundation, I was living in fear. Paycheck to paycheck, 3 jobs at a time. Mom tried, I watched her crying, not receiving a dime. My father was gone, he was doing his thing. As the years went by, my phone wouldn't ring. Played outside every day as long as I could to get away from the loneliness under the roof. I remember the day when you said your goodbyes. My hero was gone, that relationship died. How could you leave? We caused you no harm. You left mom and all of us to struggle alone. But the best thing that happened was you closing the door. I stepped up, became a man like an eagle, a sword. Take a look, this is my rise. My rise to the top. I become much stronger now. And I'll never stop unless I learn. Give glory to God. Now I protect my family. Like I'm Freddie Rock trying to make friends. Never having any money, it was tough to fit in. Kids can be cruel, and their parents were worse. I was treated like scum, even at my church. I thank God for those loyal to me. If it wasn't for them, then I wouldn't be me. Yeah, you know who you are, you helped me get through. One thing is for certain, I'm indebted to you. I raised my right hand, promised to be strong. I said my goodbyes, it was time to...
Good morning, Tampa Bay, and a Merry Christmas to you. Happy holidays. Thank you for calling and listening in to Pull No Punches Radio here on the Tan Talk Radio Network. Jay Pagliaro, Dan O'Brien with you for this Saturday morning, the final Saturday of the year 2013. We're going to close it out with a bang, as we're going to close out the MMA landscape with a bang. We got a lot of stuff to discuss here in terms of that tonight. But first and foremost, let me go ahead and introduce my co-host, the one, the only, Dan O'Brien. Dan, what's going on today, man?
Good morning, Jay. Hey, not a whole lot. Well, looking forward to doing the show today. I hope everybody out there had a wonderful Merry Christmas and holiday season. And we're looking to start 2014 off right now. And we're going to talk some great stuff today about what's going on in the MMA world as well as in the sports community out there in the Tampa Bay area. So let's go ahead and get it started.
We'll kick it off today by first and foremost giving you our telephone number where you can call, as always, to chime on board, 727-441-3000. Also, Mr. Bill, if you could play the tunes of the 866 number for us.
Call the show now, toll-free, 1-866-826-1340. That's 1-866-826-1340 or 727-441-3000. That's 727-441-3000.
So if you're tuned in, you want to chime in, feel free to give those telephone numbers a call, as we've got plenty of stuff to discuss today. Today's topics, though, we want to get your opinions on these. The big fight tonight, the fight that everybody's talking about. Anderson Silva, Chris Weidman, Part 2. These two gentlemen will do it one more time for the UFC welterweight title. Also, we will get to see Another much hyped, much overdue rematch is Ronda Rousey defends the women's 135-pound title against her arch nemesis, Miesha Tate. There's been a lot of build-up, a lot of bad blood in this one. That'll play out here tonight in Las Vegas in the Octagon. Also, we've seen a lot of, saw some interesting happenings yesterday at the weigh-ins. We'll discuss that momentarily. Other fights to pay attention to. Josh Barnett takes on Travis Brown, the former UFC heavyweight champion, made a big splash in his return to the Octagon for the first time in 10 years by knocking out Frank Mir. He gets a big step forward in competition, taking on the very underrated Brown, the San Diego native, is currently one loss in his MMA career, 14-1, 13 stoppages. So this one ought to be a barn burner, to say the very least. But the fight I'm going to start out with first, and this one I'm not really even so much going to talk about the fight itself. It was more or less what happened at the weigh-in yesterday. Now, I've come on this program before, and I've openly jockeyed and talked about how difficult the weight cut process really is. And I'm not gonna rest on my laurels here, because frankly, it is a difficult thing to cut weight. It's not easy. Anybody sitting on at home with the beer in their hand can say, hey, I could do that, I could do that. Cutting weight sucks. There's no better way around it. I just can't help but say, though, Dan, Diego Brandao, 8 pounds. Now, you had a chance, I'm sure, to train with Diego in New Mexico when you've been up at Greg Jackson's, but how do you miss by 8 pounds when you've had almost 3 months to cut the weight? I'm just, to me, that's, again, I'm not trying to sound like a hypocrite, because I've defended people on this show for missing weight, but man, is 8 pounds a lot.
It is, and we all talk about it all the time. It's inexcusable. Our camp, we have never had that issue, as you know. We take it very seriously, but we just really don't know what the buildup was. We don't know exactly what program he was under at the time, and he probably just mistimed it. And it's unfortunate, because the kid's exciting. He came up in the Ultimate Fighter there simultaneously with Johnny Dotson. And, in that camp, you don't usually see that very often. So until we really find out what happened, I don't want to, speculate whether their program's falling off as far as their cutting and stuff. But as you know, with Greg Jackson and Winklejohn, that's very rare for that to happen. So you never know if there was like a slight injury along the way where it affected his weight cut, or if he just, it just didn't time out right. So I guess more will come out on that. Probably we'll see a lot of it tonight, and a lot of speculation will be talked about, I'm sure, with Rogan and some other guys tonight. We'll really find out exactly what's in place.
There could be a lot of things to be happening. And to be honest, if you look at the reaction of Dana White when Diego missed by that, now you figured 8-pound weight miss. You figured Dana White was going to be seething, considering you know as well as I do how much he just deplores missing weight. That's nothing else gets you in the doghouse with Dana White. Missing weight will do it, and especially by that big of a margin. I got to believe that's probably the biggest weight cut miss. That's probably the biggest weight miss in UFC history. And I'm expecting to see Dana spitting nails, furious, angry. Dustin Poirier, his opponent tonight, was pretty angry, was pretty disrespected. But Dana White, his reaction really, to me, spoke 1,000 words. Patted him on the back, sort of said, it's all right, don't worry about it. So, maybe there is more to this backstory than meets the eye. It's not as though Diego, and he's not getting a free pass here by any means. To miss weight is inexcusable. To miss weight by almost an entire weight class more, that to me is just completely off-putting. But this is the guy, though, who traditionally misses weight. This is the first time in his career, in my opinion, in my knowledge, that he's actually ever missed weight. So maybe there is more to it than meets the eye.
Well, yeah, a lot of times you and I won't know until later on, obviously, as well as the public. But just by the reaction of it, I've seen variances of, reactions when it comes to that. So I think something was probably said ahead of time, and the way it looks to me, so they probably are like, well, do your best to get there. You've never missed it before. You've been nothing but, a great fighter for us. And if you don't make it, hey, you got to recover from this. You got to rebuild your reputation. But it just didn't look like in the post-conference and everything else that it was that big of a deal. So I think there's some underlying stuff that may have happened, and we just don't know that. And, again, it's uncharacteristic for that camp as well as that individual to miss weight. So I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt on this. Yes, it is a weight class difference, but simultaneously, it happens, and we'll see how it goes. That's all I'm gonna say about that.
And the two people that didn't miss weight, our main event, Chris Weidman, Anderson Silva, in UFC welterweight or middleweight division history. Again, you got just the build-up for this, Dan. I mean, it's just, again, probably the most anticipated rematch, again, in middleweight history, if not of the year 2013. Just the story behind it. Chris Weidman defeats Anderson Silva to win the UFC welterweight title, the middleweight title. Boy, I'm off today. He wins the middleweight title, knocks Anderson Silva out, and his 7-year reign. And it seems like, since then, dare I say, the pressure seems to be more on Weidman as the champion now. I mean, and it seems like there's just a lot of underlying doubt surrounding him heading into this bout. I'm not so sure. I mean, to me, I'm a big Chris Weidman fan. I've been a Weidman fan from the start. I think, to me, he's got to be the favorite heading into this. And, but if you listen to the general consensus, he's just been almost as though he's got no chance if you listen to some of them. You talk to the people online, and almost overwhelmingly, a lot of them are saying, hey, this is Silva's fight. This is Silva's fight. Weidman's going to get destroyed. He's going to get knocked out. I'm sort of confused by this, Dan. I mean, it's almost as though people are ruling his knockout out as a fluke. I mean, he didn't just beat Anderson Silva the first time; he knocked him out. Yet he's almost the underdog in this fight. I'm confused.
Well, I think you look at Chris Weidman in his fights. As you know, he came up and just cleaned house, but he didn't necessarily get a lot of TV time. A lot of people over the last 7-8 years have grown to see Anderson Silva do some of the greatest things ever in UFC history, as well as in mixed martial arts as a whole. So I think the bandwagon will always continue to stay on Anderson Silva until we finally see him dethroned for good, and that very well could happen tonight. But I think at the same time, Anderson Silva has the ability, as you know, to the one punch, the exciting foot kicks or whatever it may be, that keep people believing in that thing. So I think once he was defeated, people still missed what he brought to the octagon. So I agree in a sense where people are coming from. But Chris Weidman at the same time, I mean, he beat him in all facets of the game. I think it's kind of disrespectful in a way how people haven't given him any props. But, hey, he's got tonight to go ahead and answer those critics. And at the same time, if he does beat Anderson again tonight, they pass the torch for good, and Anderson Silva can walk away from the UFC knowing that he was the most dominant, individual to ever walk into the octagon. So I think it's a win-win for the UFC. I think Chris Weidman has all the pressure on him because many people still think it was a fluke, and Anderson was acting, kind of silly when he was in there, as we all knew, like almost Muhammad Ali is, So let's see where it goes. But I'm not. I would never bet against Chris Weidman ever again. I'll tell you that much.
I mean, to me, I actually believe that this is just a different fight, so to speak, in my opinion, when it comes to the pressure. I mean, before, realistically, the last fight, Chris Weidman, and I think this will tell how he handles it. Chris Weidman realistically had no pressure on him. I mean, he was getting a title shot. He was, in there with Anderson Silva. So obviously there's the pressure of being a challenger for a bout. And believe me, you can be a challenger, but you can go from challenger to forgotten very quickly. I can name a dozen names that have gone from challenger to unemployed fighting on a regional circuit within 3 fights. It's not uncommon. But, I mean, this fight, he really had no pressure on him, though. He was fighting Anderson Silva. Everybody thought he was going to, was going to put a fight up. Some people thought he was going to win, but had he lost, no big deal. A guy 9 fights into his career, a learning experience. Now, he's got that added pressure. Not only is he the defending the middleweight championship, but he's really defending himself against the critics who said that, he shouldn't have won the last one. And I'm going to tell you, Dan, I don't think that last fight was a fluke. Do I think the knockout was a fluke? Absolutely. However, I think Chris Weidman is that good, and I think that what he's going to have to do tonight, obviously win, but I think he's going to have to win decisively to silence the critics, because I think if he goes in there and does what he should do, what I would call for him to do, and that's take this fight to the ground and keep it there, I think the criticism is going to be tenfold. I think it's going to be worse. So, realistically speaking, though, who do you think has more pressure heading into this fight? Do you think it's Weidman, or do you think Silva, who is also answering questions about, whether he's facing Father Time? I mean, who faces more question marks here heading into this fight?
I think Chris Weidman has all the pressure, and I say that just because, he's fighting, Superman, and when it comes to the UFC. So everybody's still going to, it's kind of like along the lines of this. Everybody wants Weidman to win. They're setting themselves up for the fall to where Anderson wins again, and then everything goes back to status quo again or normal. So I personally believe, though, that Chris Weidman, it's his time. He looks great. He comes from a great camp, puts the work in. And I have to commend his camp because since he has been the champion, you haven't seen very much of Chris Weidman. He has not taken advantage of all the media. He has not taken advantage of the commercial opportunities that some fighters or that would in the past. This kid has stayed grounded. He has continued to work hard. He comes from a great camp. And I will tell you, he's probably got a lot of that experience from Matt Serra when Matt Serra defeated George St. Pierre and everybody thought it was a fluke. And they probably don't want that to happen again. So if you look at the blueprint that they've used for this camp, Chris Weidman has been pretty quiet, in my opinion, versus a lot of newfounded champions. I mean, what do you think about that, Jay?
To me, that's a telling sign. I mean, when you win a title, especially 9 fights into your career, not only win a title, but beat a living legend like Anderson Silva, the most dominant champion in MMA history and easily the greatest middleweight of all time, there are so many ways that you could fall off the beaten path. Weidman hasn't. And I know everybody says, everybody's saying, Dan, he's going to be facing a determined Anderson Silva. He's going to be facing a determined, motivated Anderson Silva. He's going to be facing an Anderson Silva that's not going to be dancing around in a cage and playing games. Guess what? Chris Weidman's just as motivated. I mean, people tend to forget that. This isn't, all right, I won my title, now I'm going to rest on my laurels and sink back into the, just being another name. This guy has worked from all accounts and purposes, and from people in the New York MMA scene that are in the know have told me he's worked as hard for this fight as he's had in any fight in his career, and that says a lot because this is a guy with an impeccable work ethic. So, I mean, I think that, keeping that grounded mentality that you're talking about, number one, that's who Chris Weidman is. Number two, though, I mean, I think that's a telling sign right now because it shows he's not getting caught up with the spotlight. He's not getting caught up in the spotlight, oh, crap, I'm the champ, it's time to change gears. He's staying true to who he is. And I think that in itself, Dan, will be why he's going to win tonight because, yeah, he's facing insurmountable pressure. He's facing the pressure of the MMA fan base who's basically saying, you have no chance. He's facing the insurmountable pressure of the fan base who, all in general, in unison, is saying, hey, your win the last time was a fluke. He's not going to fall into that. He's going to do what he needs to do to win this fight tonight. I'm calling it on record. I thought he was going to win the last one. I think he's going to win this one. Do I think he's going to knock him out again? Probably not. But I think what's going to happen is you're going to see a 5-round dogfight, and I think Weidman's going to do what he does best, and that's take this fight to the ground. And I think he's going to, stick to his bread and butter. If anything, if it's not a decision, I think if he finishes him, it's going to be by submission, which Anderson has shown propensity to get submitted in the past. So we'll see how this plays out, Dan.
Yeah, I think the difference here that Anderson has going against him, if he doesn't win by strikes and win within like the first 2-3 rounds, I think it's over. I think Anderson, like I said, he's brought us all the excitement in the world over the last years, but hey, age does catch up. And you're talking about a 38-year-old man going against a very young and determined fighter. I can tell you right now, Weidman has not backed off at all. And what you're going to see tonight, regardless of the outcome, you're going to see a kid that's upped his game probably double since the last time he's been in there. He's taken this very serious. He's put the work in. He's brought in the right people. So I'll tell you, I think Chris Weidman, and to be honest with you, I kind of agree with you. I think he goes the submission route if he can get him down, which Chris Weidman's wrestling is just superior. And if he gets him down on the ground, I definitely think between the ground and pound and the submission that Anderson Silva is very vulnerable to that. And I just don't think his body is what it used to be, and it's nothing personal against Anderson. It's not that he didn't work hard. It's just he's fought off some nagging injuries, and I just don't think your body heals the same way that 25-year-old kid does,
and you're not only talking about, a 38-year-old with a lot of injuries, but this is a guy who's got a lot of mileage on the tank, in terms of his MMA career. He hasn't, and I'm not saying that he's starting to show it, because I'm going to tell you right now, despite the taunting, despite the dancing, despite, all the extracurricular nonsense that happened in their first fight, that was Anderson Silva at his best. And, that also was Chris Weidman at his best. So it's just reality. It could be just a reality that Chris Weidman's a better fighter. It happens. Passing the torch, I think this is, to be honest with you, the right fight to happen. I know it's Weidman's first title defense, and some people are against the idea of, immediate rematches. But my opinion, they needed to make this second fight. Weidman wins and passes the torch once and for all, and it fully answers critics that, the criticisms that this guy's a fluke, that, he's just a one-trick pony, that he's a one-hit wonder, so to speak. I mean, basically, and I'm the biggest Matt Serra fan alive, Chris Weidman wants to prove he's not Matt Serra. He's not Matt Serra, a guy who shocked the world, pulled off the upset that nobody thought would happen, and then lost the title immediately thereafter, and, his career wasn't the same after. Weidman's not that guy. They may train at the same camp, but believe me, this is a guy who's going to have some staying power in the middleweight division. This is a guy who, just to me, is too good and too talented and too young yet to be a one-trick pony, to be a one-hit wonder.
Oh, yeah. You look at, if there's a different scenario, after that victory took place with Weidman, everybody probably enjoyed the moment. And then when they all got back to New York, they're probably like, look, what we cannot do is let this happen, what happened to me and Matt Serra. But we also got to realize, though, Matt Serra was already a UFC veteran and other promotions prior to that when he had his, he resurrected his career there on The Ultimate Fighter against Shoney and some of the other guys. So, as you know, that was a great fight he performed. He had a wonderful knockout punch on GSP. But you're right. When he showed up the next time, he wasn't there. But we're talking a very much different scenario here, and I think we got to be very careful not to fall into that. We got a kid that's on the upswing, not a guy that was already in the UFC for a while, resurrected it through The Ultimate Fighter and then reappeared. So this kid is young, he's hungry, and I can guarantee you those lessons learned have already been implemented into that next camp, and, the mindset and all that other kind of stuff that goes with becoming a champion, because, you're dealing with a guy that's a thoroughbred, that's definitely capable of going back in here and improving his game, every day and every week or whatever, as long as his career continues to progress.
Anderson Silva, Chris Weidman, what do you guys think, Tampa? Give us a call, 727-441-3000, or the numbers Mr. Bill is about to play now.
Call the show now, toll-free, 1-866-826-1340. That's 1-866-826-1340, or 727-441-3000. That's 727-441-3000.
So give us a call. Give us your thoughts on that. Real quick, I'm going to touch on some of the other main fight on this card, Dan. You got Miesha Tate. You got Ronda Rousey. These two young ladies met in Strikeforce, with Rousey winning the Strikeforce 135-pound women's title. They're going to meet again for the UFC 135-pound women's title tonight. A lot of bad blood between these two. We saw it play out on The Ultimate Fighter. We see a lot of bad blood fights, so to speak, to where, I hate this guy, no, I hate him. This is real. This is legit. These two women do not like one another. I've had the chance to speak to Miesha on my other radio shows in previous times, and the hatred is there. They dislike one another, and it's going to play out tonight. To be possibly the final chapter of this rivalry. Obviously, if Ronda wins, it's the end of the feud once and for all. But will Ronda win? That is the question. We talked about pressure, Dan, and let me tell you, since The Ultimate Fighter, the pressure, I think, has been magnified tenfold. Now, granted, this is a woman who's handled pressure pretty much her whole career. She is arguably the face of women's MMA. I mean, with apologies to the other great female fighters out there, and there are many of them, she is the face of women's MMA. She was in the first ever women's MMA fight in the UFC. First ever woman to coach on The Ultimate Fighter. So this woman's handled pressure fairly well. But since the show, though, there's a lot more people that want to see this woman get her block knocked off. On top of the fact she's a 10-1 favorite heading into this fight. So realistically, all the pressure in the world is off Miesha Tate, in my opinion. I mean, what do you think? Do you think that this first fight goes any differently than we saw the first time around?
I don't know that it does. I just don't know if Miesha Tate's wrestling is going to be able to, manhandle Ronda Rousey. I think Ronda Rousey plays the same game. You're not going to see very much striking from her. You're going to see maybe a little bit to set something up. I think Ronda Rousey, though, if we watched her. I mean, everybody sits there and says, "Oh, she's becoming boring," But to submit somebody over and over and over and over again, that's being an excellent, person when it comes to jiu-jitsu. So, or whatever style she's using at that time. But I think all the pressure, to be honest with you, I think it's on Miesha Tate, because if she loses this, I don't think she gets back to the championship fight ever again. So I think Ronda Rousey, she's got one to give. So if she did get caught short, yeah, a lot of the hype as far as her, dominant, her dominant force in the UFC, yeah, that could be, tarnished a little bit, but I don't think it does anything to Ronda Rousey if she loses. She comes right back and, armbar somebody the next time. But I think Miesha Tate, she has to deliver tonight, because after that last fight, she was dominated, and if she gets dominated this time, I think that's the end of the road for her as far as being anything legitimately in the in the championship, picture for a long time, if at all.
To be honest with you, I think that in point you do have something going on there. If Tate does win tonight for whatever reason, I think Rousey gets an immediate rematch, and then we really close out this trilogy. But my thought, though, and I've said this for quite some time, I don't know if Ronda sticks around MMA after she suffered her first taste of defeat. She's already doiling in Hollywood. If you just look at her reactions from when she first started her MMA career, even when she first got into the UFC to now, dare I say, she almost was bored and disinterested. She almost looks as though she's not I don't want to say the fire's not there, because Ronda, say what you will about her, she is probably the most competitive fighter in the sport today, and that says quite a bit. Is the fire still there, though? I mean, is she starting to wilt under the pressure of being in front of the spotlight? Because, again, we talk about pressure. We talk about, the weight of the world being on one's shoulders, as we talked about with Weidman. With Rousey, I think it's tenfold, because she represents women's MMA. She is the reason, and Dana White hasn't hidden this fact, that there are women in the UFC to begin with. So, we'll see how it plays out. Does she stick around? Does she not? Does she win tonight? Again, she's got that arm bar. She is the consummate. They call her a consummate one-trick pony. People forget her judo is good too. But this woman's a two-trick pony. But those two tricks do the job. They do it well. We'll see if Miesha if she can neutralize that and get in with those takedowns and dirty box and punch Ronda and make her struggle. We'll see how that plays out tonight. But shifting gears here, Dan, talk a little bit about some stuff that's going on in the sports world, specifically the NFL, final week of the regular season. Now, here's what we know so far. Taking a look at both conferences, the playoff scenario looks like this. In the AFC, Denver has clinched the AFC West and clinched the first-round bye. New England, the AFC East champ, Indianapolis, AFC South, Cincinnati, the AFC North, and Kansas City has clinched a playoff spot. They go from worst of the playoffs in 1 year under Andy Reid. What a great job done there. Meanwhile, some other playoff synopsis. Here's how this is going to play out. Denver, and this is the AFC alone, will clinch a home field advantage throughout the AFC playoffs if they win tomorrow or New England loses. The Patriots clinch home field if they win. If they win and Denver loses, they clinch a first-round bye if they win. So those are right now, we're looking at the 1 and 2 seeds being Denver, New England, plausibly, unless both teams lose and Cincinnati could potentially clinch home field advantage. Meanwhile, the Bengals right now, they're the 3 seed, seems solidified in there. The only real upward mobility, they could be number 1 overall if they win, and both Denver and New England lose. They could clinch a first-round bye if New England loses. But they need to win. Indianapolis in their slot at number 4. Apparently, there's a chance they could get a first-round bye, too, with an Indianapolis with a win, a New England loss, and a Cincinnati loss. Now, meanwhile, the big scenario is who makes that final playoff spot. We've got 5 of the 6 playoff spots locked down, Dan. Coming down to 2 teams, it's between Miami, Baltimore, Pittsburgh, and San Diego. Those are the 4 teams left in play. Miami right now needs looks like they're in the catbird seat. If they win and San Diego wins, they're in the playoffs. So if you're following me there, Miami wins, San Diego wins, they're in the playoffs. Or if they win and Baltimore loses, Baltimore clinches a playoff spot. If they win, San Diego loses. They win, Miami loses. Or Pittsburgh, Miami, and San Diego lose. Meanwhile, the Steelers, they need to win and have Baltimore, Miami, and San Diego lose. San Diego, they need to have both Miami and Baltimore lose, and they'll win, and they get in. So did you follow all that?
I'll tell you what, I don't know how you did all that research, but that just made me dizzy as could be. But I'll tell you, I think you're right. Miami has probably the best scenario, but so many things could take place this weekend. And it's amazing to see, though, like how Baltimore has fallen off. But I would think that, if anybody needs to rise to the occasion, it's going to be the more experienced team. So I would put my money there on, Baltimore, then Pittsburgh, and then the Chargers. But I think Miami has a more favorable position for more realistic things to happen. I mean, I don't know if that makes a lot of sense to you, but the way I see it and based off of the way it looks, I think that you hit it right on the head there with the Dolphins.
I mean, what they basically do, they right off the bat, they got to beat the Jets, and that's that in itself. Should they win it? Absolutely. They beat them pretty convincingly earlier in the season, but is this young team suited for the pressure? And I'm a Dolphin fan, so I'm going to ask, is this team suited for the pressure? They're young. They're relatively inexperienced in moments like these. We'll see if they rise to the occasion or not. Meanwhile, other matchups this week, Dan, for those that are in the know, we'll get you the NFL matchups for this week momentarily. But I know they play. I know Baltimore, I believe, is playing. I believe they're playing Cincinnati. So in that sense, Miami has they got to be rooting for Cincinnati. That's a favorable matchup because for Miami's sense, because Cincinnati has a lot to prove. They can get a first-round bye if all the nuts and bolts fall into place. So, and meanwhile, I believe, I want to say that San Diego's playing Denver this week or Kansas City. Take a look here and double check and find out here. But, that's Miami has some luck in there. Yeah, they are playing Kansas City for sure as San Diego. So if they need a San Diego win, let's be honest, Kansas City's clinched their playoff spot. They're not going to go any higher than what they are. They're not, they have no chance at a first round bye. They have no chance at, really getting home field advantage. I fully expect to see the Chiefs park a lot of starters to rest for the playoffs matchup the next week. So, I mean, Miami, to me, they're sitting pretty here. They're sitting pretty, but they've got to win. They absolutely have to beat the New York Jets on Sunday night.
Yeah, I think that's very much attainable. So you cover the NFC very well, but look at the NFC this week. I mean, that's the division that's got all kinds of things going on out there. You got all kinds of games that actually mean winning their division. So you look at Chicago, Green Bay, and then we look also out there at Philadelphia versus Dallas. We know Tony Romo, so this is going to be real exciting over here in the NFC this week.
Absolutely. We'll looking forward to seeing these matchups. I love playoff football because it's the best time of the year, in my opinion, especially this time where you're talking teams that are looking to get in. I mean, that makes the last week in regular season games worth watching. Now, real quick, we'll do a rundown of what's going on in the NFC. As you know, Seattle, they've clinched a playoff spot. Carolina's clinched a playoff spot. San Francisco's clinched a playoff spot. Those are the only three certainties right now. This one, the NFC, a little bit wide open. Now, let's do a rundown of Seattle real quick. They clinched the NFC West and home field advantage with a win. So all they got to do is win this week. In their big matchup, they take on the they take on the St. Louis Rams. So all they got to do is beat St. Louis. They're in the playoffs. Then they're in the playoffs. They get home field advantage throughout. If they should happen to stumble against the Rams for any reason whatsoever, if San Francisco loses, they clinch home field advantage. So that one, Seattle, pretty clear cut. They need to win, or they need to have San Francisco lose to Arizona, which isn't far-fetched. I mean, Arizona's still got a fighting shot at the playoffs themselves, and we'll discuss that momentarily. Otherwise, other teams to look at here, New Orleans, as mentioned, they clinch a playoff spot with a win, or an Arizona loss. They clinch the NFC South in a first-round bye with a win over Arizona and a Carolina loss. Meanwhile, Carolina clinches the South in a first-round bye. If they win, New Orleans loses. So, and they also would clinch home field advantage, Dan. If they win, Seattle and San Francisco. If they win, Seattle loses, and ironically enough, San Francisco wins. Meanwhile,
Right.
wrapping it up, San Francisco clinches the NFC West in a first-round bye with a win and a Seattle loss. Arizona clinches a playoff spot with a win and a New Orleans loss. Philadelphia, Dallas will be playing for the NFC East title. Winner takes all there. Chicago clinches the Chicago Green Bay will battle for the NFC North. So we'll follow all that. Next week we'll have a lot of playoff games to talk about. Meanwhile, we actually got our third co-host on the line, Colton Smith. Colton, Merry Christmas to you. What's going on, mate?
He hung up.
All right. Well, let's continue our conversation here then. NFC playoff-wise, Dan, what do you think of the playoff synopsis there?
It's going to be exciting. You know, I mean, a lot of teams have come around at the end of the year that we weren't expecting to really get back in there. I mean, primarily, look at Arizona. They brought themselves back alive, and you look at the Chiefs early in the season. This is going to be a great weekend, and a lot of things are going to be played out. And there's a lot of go-and-go homers, you know, like Packers-Bears as well as you got Dallas-Philly. So I don't know what the playoffs are going to look like, but this week sure looks like about week 3 of the playoff season under normal circumstances.
Oh, what I like is the fact that you got two natural rivals, Dallas, Philly, and Chicago, Green Bay, playing for all the marbles. But you want to talk about games where the opposite stories are in effect. Green Bay's got Aaron Rodgers coming back, which is a big coup for them. They've got Aaron Rodgers coming back. There's a chance they could get Randall Cobb back for this game. Meanwhile, they're taking on Chicago. I mean, one of the oldest rivalries in the NFL, one of the best rivalries in the NFL, and the stakes could not be higher. Meanwhile, opposite end of that spectrum, you got Dallas, and I know you're a big Cowboys fan, so you're going to have a lot to say about this. Tony Romo, much maligned in Dallas. You know, I don't think that guy gets nearly the recognition he deserves. I think he gets a lot of undue grief for choking under pressure. He's out this week. Tony Romo out. They're going to be starting Kyle Orton, who will be making his first start since 2011. They got John Kitna, who's been retired and working as a biology teacher for the last 4 seasons as his backup. To me, that's not good for Dallas. To me, they need all hands on deck. Losing the captain of the ship right before, the winner-take-all game. We'll find out if it really is Tony Romo. I'll just put it that way this Sunday night, because Philadelphia 8-6. You red hot. Nick Foles playing as good a football as any quarterback in the game. So I mean, we'll see if that plays out under course.
Well, I think offensively, DeMarco Murray is the answer. And I think the 5 and 10 little throw into space with Kyle Orton, if you look at his career in Chicago, let's take the Denver piece out of it, but let's talk some real football here. When he was with Chicago, they were able to do very well with Matt Forte and then nickel and diamond out there to Devin Hester and a few of the other receivers that were on the Bears at that time. So if they play that formation correctly, I think they can pick they can pick Green Bay. And they can pick the Eagles' defense apart. They've shown some vulnerabilities this year. Now, on the flip side of that, I think Dallas' defense is what the issue is here. I think they're at least worried about Kyle Orton being able to perform. And I think the defense is having to stop look what they did to Chicago. That's why I was saying the Chicago reference. Last week, what the Eagles did to the Bears defense. Now, granted, they have fallen off considerably from one of the best defenses in the NFL in 2 years to one of the worst. And that's because they got rid of Brian Urlacher, didn't want to pay him, and thought that they could bring in Boston to replace that. Obviously, that cannot happen. But when you look at the scenario, I think all of the pressure's on the Dallas defense. I think Kyle Orton is a game manager, much like Trent Dilfer was. And I think they have the weapons on the offense to go ahead and move the ball. I just think the defense is what is going to be the issue here, and I just don't think Dallas has a chance to be able to perform against the Eagles at this time after watching last week's game against the Bears.
Absolutely. Now, locally here, we're talking about a couple of teams. One team that's not going to be in the playoffs, but we'll talk about them, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They could play a important role here, Dan. They're sort of limping down the stretch. Question marks as to what's going to happen next. Could Greg Schiano, could this be his final game as head coach of the Buccaneers? They're right now sitting at 4-11, last place in a tough NFC South. Dan, local angle here. Do you think this is the end of the line for Greg Schiano? Do you think it should be?
Oh, I missed you a little bit there. Are you talking about for the coach of Tampa Bay? Is that what you were asking? No, you got to get to a point where you've obviously got to let the system work itself out. You cannot continue to hot seat coaches. I mean, Tampa had some of the greatest teams there, in the early 2000s. Actually, all the way up into probably 2005. They were still playing great football. So I don't think this constant moving. I grew up there, and coach after coach after coach. You have got to work within the system, and you have to figure out, what are your goals, and it doesn't happen overnight. You look at Andy Reid's scenario. He just happened to have a bunch of draft picks laying around there. They executed a great free agency program, as you know, and look where they got. That's what the focus Tampa needs to do. Is they need to get believing in the program. You can't always constantly worry about losing your job and other things. You got to look at the track record from before and where he was at and what he was able to do. And I just don't think it's time is now, to get rid of him. And also, who else you going to put in there?
Well, that's the billion-dollar question. Everybody in sports anymore nowadays, it seems like all sports fans are at a what have you done for me lately mentality. I'll tell you right off the bat, there's a lot of Dolphin fans who are calling for this is absurd and ridiculous, but they're calling for Joe Philbin's head. And they're in the playoffs. They need to win one game and make the playoffs. So, it's just a sad reality. Sports fans have a what have you done for me lately mentality. And obviously Tampa Bay looking at 4-12, possibly on the season if they lose this week. Looking at a 4-12 season, a top 5 pick in the draft, and a lot of people pointing to the way he handled the Josh Freeman situation, which was not good, admittedly. But to me, I don't like the roller coaster mentality. It doesn't work. Look at what's going on in Washington. What Dan Snyder said. This guy recycles head coaches every year. It seems like. If you've stayed 3 years, you've stayed past your expiration date. Oakland the same way. They're getting ready to fire their coach, Dennis Allen. How many coaches have they had since John Gruden left? It's just a recycle of badness. And I know a lot of people mentioning the name Bill Cowher at Tampa Bay. He seems like his name and John Gruden's name pop up everywhere. Opening. It's madness, Dan. Take a coach, stick with them. Give them the 3 to 4 year window, in my opinion. If they're still struggling, then let them go. Or if they're so bad in their first season that, or first couple seasons that you'd be a fool to not fire them, that you're going to hurt your organization long-term by keeping them, then there's exceptions. But to me, Greg Schiano had a bad 2013, no question about it. Greg Schiano is still putting his fingerprints on the Tampa Bay Buccaneer organization, though, trying to build this franchise up. Because let me tell you, he didn't inherit the John Gruden. He didn't inherit the John Gruden Buccaneers. He wasn't John Gruden walking into a plum situation that just needed to take that next step. He inherited a pretty bad team that needed basically blown up and started over again.
Jay?
I think he deserved that third year at minimum.
Jay, we got Colton back.
Go ahead and bring Colton on the line. Colton, what's going on, man? Hello?
Yeah, can you hear me? You got me? Yeah, we got you, Colton. What's up, buddy? You hear me?
Sounds like his phone cuts in and out. Go ahead, Colton. Try again now. He's like there. He sounds like bacon.
Not Kevin Bacon either.
Oh, was that him? Was that Jay or was that Colton?
No, that was me. That was Jay.
All right, he hung up.
No, let's go try that.
Yeah. I'll have to give him a call. Colton's on the road right now. He's traveling to go work out there at the Olympic Training Center with some of the greatest boxers in the United States. So I think he's probably, having some technical difficulty either at the airport or, in between airplanes.
I have a question.
Yeah.
My brother, he's a big Bruce Lee fan. Does a lot of those MMA fighters practice a lot of Bruce Lee's techniques?
Well, that's a really good question there. Probably there's some out there that's starting off, working in that martial art, but probably there's, here's the thing you got to think about. I think Jay will echo this. The sport has evolved so much. There's a little bit of everything and everybody anymore, so you can see nobody practices in just any one individual sport or, martial art anymore. You've got to be well-rounded in everything. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Karate's very much alive and well in MMA. You want to talk Bruce Lee? There's a couple fighters I want you to check out, Bill, that really solidify the karate mentality. One is Lyoto Machida. That is 9/10 of, and ironically, his nickname's a dragon. No, I guess maybe not so much ironically, Dan, but you want to talk about somebody who's got just the perfect karate base. It's Lyoto Machida. This guy is 9/10 of his fights are won by using karate-based, attacks. So you got him. And I don't really know if he's necessarily a karate base, but What is Kung Lee? I mean, he I know he utilizes some karate in his offense, Dan, but he's not really a full karate expert by chance. I think he's more of a stand show expert, which is a little bit of a different animal.
Yeah, but he's got a little kung fu in there, you know. I mean, you can see it, and mixtures of things. And then we also got a lot of taekwondo. That's still very relevant, as you know, with Henderson and, you know, a few of the other guys. So, yeah, I think those sports do hang around, and they actually, if they have the right athleticism, they're able to make those things work for them in the octagon.
So those two I want you to take a look at, Bill. If you're a big karate fan, if you're a big fan of Bruce Lee, specifically Machida, check out some of his fights because this guy is he is karate 101. I know Tim Boach uses it some too, but I mean, it's just Lyoto Machida karate 101. Nobody does it better than him. Speaking of things that don't do better, Dan, we're in the midst of bowl season here. Just saw this little statistic on Facebook that there's the Outback Bowl coming up here on January 1. The players for LSU and Iowa, they had a big dinner yesterday at a welcome dinner, and they consumed over 5,000 pounds of food. Think about that, 5,000 pounds of food, which included 1,600 dinner rolls, 1,600 pieces of coconut shrimp, 1,200 pounds of cheesecake, 900 pounds of ribs, 750 pounds of sirloin steak and chicken, 700 pounds of house salad, 400 pounds of baked potato, and 80 gallons of barbecue sauce. I just got sick reading half of that.
I guess my biggest question is, Jay, where do you find time to get all this information?
Gotta love the power of my cell phone. I'll just put it that way. My Samsung Galaxy S3. I was actually on Facebook to promote to get people to call, and I saw that little snippet pop up. I'm like, that's a lot of junk. That's a lot of food, which is, you know, a lot of junk. I'm not talking about what's floating around in my mind now, but it's a lot of food, man. That's a lot of food.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you know, those sport programs, those guys can eat now. You got to look at them all now. And it's not just meaning the bigs either, like the linemen. Those kids, I mean, they're probably on 35 to 5,000 guys at least, you know, when they're playing at that level. So it doesn't surprise me one bit. I just find it very impressive that Big JP can find that kind of information.
Yeah. Digging and digging. That's what I try to bring here. That's what I try to bring, you know, here on Pulling Punches Radio, along with stammering and yammering and try to make sense of what I'm talking about. But, you know, I try to bring some decent new things to the table here. We'll see if I actually figure out the art of that in 2014 and perfect it. But bowl games, though, coming up here. We got, on a local angle, obviously, I mentioned the Outback Bowl. That's going to be in Orlando. Games that will be taking place today, bowl-wise, you got Notre Dame and Rutgers. Notre Dame 1 year removed, talking about Greg Schiano, the former Rutgers head coach. Notre Dame 1 year removed from a national title appearance where they lost to Alabama. They'll be playing in the New Era Pinstripe Bowl against Greg Schiano's old team, the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. Meanwhile, the Belk Bowl in Charlotte features North Carolina and Cincinnati. The Russell Athletic Bowl, Miami takes on Louisville in what likely will be Ted Bridgewater's final game as a collegiate. He almost likely to go number one overall. And then we got the Buffalo Wild Wings, Dan, a game that I was going to be in attendance, but there was some coinciding incidents going on with USC 168 that I could not bypass on. Michigan takes on Kansas State. So that's today, and all bowl games taking place today here. And then we've got, of course, next week, I don't know if we'll be back in time for to discuss the BCS, as we've only got about 6 minutes left here in the show. But I know the BCS coming up here, some of them New Year's Day. That'll be next January. You got Nebraska taking on Georgia. UNLV taking on North Texas in the Heart of Dallas Bowl. Then you got Iowa and LSU in the Outback Bowl, that game I mentioned where they ate over 5,000 pounds worth of food. Capital One Bowl, Wisconsin and South Carolina. That ought to be a slugfest between two very good defensive-oriented teams with some sparks of offense. And then you got the Rose Bowl, Stanford and Michigan State. And locally, the game we talked about, the Tostitos Fiesta Bowl, Baylor and Central Florida. Before we get into the other mean bowl games, we got the Cotton Bowl January 2nd between Oklahoma and Alabama. Then the third, we have the final bit of games. We'll talk about the national title one because that's coming up next Monday, so we'll be able to break that down here in full next week. But you got the Cotton Bowl January 3rd, Oklahoma State, Missouri. You got the Orange Bowl, Clemson and Ohio State. And then you've got Vanderbilt and Houston in the BBVA, Compass Bowl, and Arkansas State, Ball State, which will be next Sunday. So, Dan, breaking this down, any of these bowl games really stand out to you? Specifically next Friday's games, or the Thursday's games? Any of these stand out to you as above all else?
You know, I watch them all, but the one I'm very excited to see is the Baylor game versus the Central Florida Knights. And I just think you got a number 1 or number 2 draft pick potentially coming out of there in Central Florida, going in the NFL as a quarterback. So I think it's an exciting game. And, you know, Baylor has definitely became one of the powerhouses in Texas football. So it's a good old Florida, you know, Texas shootout, and I'm looking forward to that game probably more than the rest of them, to be honest with you.
I'm looking forward to that one. I mean, to me, I'm thinking, I know a lot of people are talking about Alabama and Oklahoma. I just think Alabama, if they're motivated, could roll Oklahoma. Oklahoma, to me, and I'm not saying this as a Texas fan, but Oklahoma to me, just they've had some okay performances, but they've laid some duds. They've laid some real stinkers this year. And I just think on paper, Alabama the better team. And, you know, defensively, offensively, they're the better team. I mean, Oklahoma, they live or die by their quarterback play. Their quarterback play has been so sporadic this year. But a couple games I'm looking forward to. And, you know, Blake Bortles, likely his final game, you know, as in the collegiate ranks. He's likely going to go pro. And latest check on some of the mock draft websites is listed as high as number 3 overall. So Bortles might actually wind up coming to Tampa, you know, if possible. But Bortles, I mean, he's a guy who very accurate, very big, very strong-armed, guy who can stretch the field. That one ought to be a good one. What I'm looking forward to, the 2 games I'm really looking forward to outside of the BCS, though, I'm really liking that Cotton Bowl. I think the Cotton Bowl is a BCS potential matchup in its own right between Missouri and Oklahoma State. You know, Oklahoma State obviously had the late slip up against Oklahoma, had real BCS aspirations at 1-1 away. Missouri also saw their BCS chances slip away against Auburn in just an absolute slugfest. That one, though, that's a pretty solid matchup on paper.
Oh, it is, and I know we got to get going here, but that game right there could probably be, you know, one of your better bowls this year. It's Cotton Bowl, obviously, but at the same time, you know, that could be a very good game to kind of bring some good light to the Cotton Bowl. So I look forward to that game also. But a lot of the other ones, like I think you're right right on the money. Some of them are just going to be bye weeks again. You know, I mean, some of the teams just do not match up well. I don't say anything bad against Oklahoma because I think they played some good football this year, and I think they played some mediocre football. But I think against Alabama, I think this is obviously going to be Alabama's going to come out with all the Saban controversy and everything. And I think they're going to make a statement, and unfortunately, I think it's going to be at the expense of Oklahoma.
I agree. And the other matchups I'm looking forward to, we got a couple of minutes left. Wisconsin, South Carolina. Javadian Clowney's final game, probably at South Carolina. He another assured top 3 pick. And the Rose Bowl, Mark D'Antoni, possibly his final game at Michigan State. We're hearing all sorts of rumors going on there, which I'll talk about next week. But takes on the Stanford Cardinal, ground and pound versus ground and pound. That one ought to be a slugfest. But speaking of ground and pound, we're going to close out today's show by thanking you once again for joining us here on Pull No Punches Radio, powered by the Enlisted 9 Fight Company. We want to wish each and every one of you a happy new year. Please be safe out there on January 1st. You know, it's make sure you're safe, make sure you have a good time, but keep it real. Keep it real. Dan, any final comments before we close out the show?
Yeah, if you guys want to follow us, go to Facebook, Enlisted 9 Fight Company, and follow us there. We got some great T-shirts, and we're doing great things in the MMA community as well in the sports world. We appreciate you listening in. Thank you. We'll talk to you next week.
That was it for Dan O'Brien, for Mr. Bill behind the board. I am Jay Pagliaro. We'll talk to you next Saturday here on Pull No Punches Radio, powered by Enlisted 9 Fight Company, and brought to you by the Tan Talk Radio Network.
Now my life wasn't clear. Cracks in the foundation, I was living in fear. Paycheck to paycheck, 3 jobs at a time. I tried to watch a crying, not receiving a dime. My father was gone, he was doing his thing. As the years went by, my phone would ring. Played outside every day as long as I could to get away from the loneliness under the roof. I remember the day.
WTAN, Clearwater, Tampa Bay. WDCF, Dade City, Tampa Bay. WZHR, Zephyr Hills, Tampa Bay. Listen.
It's time for the Saturday edition of Canada Calling, the news from home for vacationing Canadians throughout Florida. This is Briar Smith speaking from Toronto. Good to have you with us.